those mechanisms need to have in place basic human rights protections. And we know from past experience with some of the clean development mechanism projects that when there are no environmental and social safeguards, there are no stakeholder consultations, and there is no redress mechanism, that we can have the unfortunate circumstances where projects were funding to combat climate change and achieve the objectives of the Paris Agreement, which include human health and welfare, sometimes have counterproductive impacts. So for us, it's actually really important that we retain these three human rights considerations: stakeholder consultations, environmental and social safeguards, and a redress mechanism for the mechanisms created under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. The mechanism needs to do a lot more to mobilize finance to address loss and damage, to be operational, because we're in a situation where that mechanism creates a space for discussion, which is important. This is an issue that's controversial in the context of the negotiations. But from a human rights perspective, it's not controversial at all. The state's responsible, the common but differentiated responsibility and equity are human rights principles. And we need to make sure that the persons most affected by climate change have access to remedy for the harms that they've suffered, that they have access to the means of adaptation that they need to survive in a changing climate. And the impacts of climate change are already here. And the loss and damage is already happening. And so one last thing I want to say on this: I think the language that we use to talk about loss and damage is really important, because it's really pain and suffering, and it's human pain and suffering. And so, there's a work stream on non-economic losses, and that includes health, culture, life. These are all human rights. And I don't know in any other context where you would talk about health, culture, and life as non-economic losses. That's something much more powerful and much more impactful to actually just talk about those things as what they are, rather than non-economic losses. So I think there's things that can be done to improve the discussion and really make that discussion about people. And I'm hoping that the long-term, that the review of the terms of references will articulate a long-term vision that does that includes a foundation in human rights and principles of participation, and looking at the impacts on people's lives, and really trying to make sure that everybody has access to remedy.